Welcome back to Iraqi Dinar Hub. Tonight, we're taking a closer look at a very specific development that's been unfolding quietly inside major U.S. financial institutions. More specifically, we're refocusing on new information about Chase Bank and how it's handling one of the most talked about emerging market currencies out there, the Iraqi dinar. While everything appears normal on the public side of banking, there are subtle movements happening behind the scenes that suggest something is shifting. Recent reports indicate that the 25,000 dinar note long, a subject of debate, has resurfaced in internal conversations across compliance teams, risk analysts, and foreign exchange support systems. None of this is front-page news, but it does point toward the early stages of internal realignment, the kind that usually starts long before anything official is announced. To understand why this matters, you have to look past the customer service counters and into the deeper, operational layers of a bank like Chase. Publicly, nothing has changed. No new announcements, no updates to customer guidelines, and no confirmation that the bank is exchanging the currency. But in global finance, real change rarely starts with public statements. It begins quietly with internal adjustments. Over the past few weeks, several private banking contacts and industry watchers have noticed that Chase is revisiting internal MDC, procedures tied to what they classify as restricted currencies. And among those currencies, the Iraqi dinar seems to be getting more attention than usual, enough to suggest that the bank is reassessing its standing more seriously. The renewed interest in the 25,000 dinar note is especially interesting because Western institutions have long brushed this denomination aside as impractical or too risky. For years, compliance teams labeled it outdated and overly tied to Iraq's inflationary past. Yet now, that same note is being looked at again by system technicians and integration teams. Why now? The answer isn't rumor-based hits tied to the concrete progress Iraq has made internally. Over the past 2 years, Iraq has reshaped its financial landscape in ways that major banks can't ignore. Upgraded controls, anti-fraud measures, digital verification tools, and closer alignment with IMF recommendations have all lowered the perceived risk of the currency. These reforms haven't gone unnoticed by institutions with exposure in the Middle East. For a bank with global reach like Chase, staying prepared is simply good strategic practice. Reintroducing a currency into their system isn't a simple switch. It requires system updates, compliance checks, algorithm adjustments, and testing on multiple levels. If Iraq's progress continues, the idea of the dinar becoming more visible in global channels shifts from unlikely to potentially necessary. Internal system updates don't guarantee that Chase will open public exchanges, but they do show that the bank wants to be ready if international conditions change quickly. This type of forward thinking is nothing new in the banking world. We've seen it before when Vietnam began modernizing its financial sector. Major institutions updated their systems long before the currency became easier to handle publicly. It usually follows a clear pattern: silence, internal testing, system alignment, and then public rollout. Chase's current actions seem to mirror that pattern. The 25,000 dinar note adds another layer of significance, given its long history of criticism. For years, analysts dismissed it as a leftover from an unstable era, too big, to outdated, to tied to inflation. But Iraq's recent momentum is challenging those old assumptions. Right now, Iraq's foreign reserves are among the highest they've been in decades, providing a solid foundation for the currency. Strong oil output continues to support government liquidity. Inflation has eased into stable ranges. The gap between the official and parallel market rates, once a sign of deep corruption, has narrowed dramatically. Add to that the rapid expansion of Iraq's digital financial infrastructure, and you get a picture of a country moving toward transparency and modernization. These are exactly the kinds of improvements that Western banks look for when assessing currency risk. This is why the dinar is starting to regain credibility. And when the data improves, large institutions begin to quietly prepare. If you walk into a Chase branch today, you'll still be told the bank does not handle dinar exchanges. That remains true. But according to reports, the way staff respond is beginning to shift. The tone is becoming less dismissive and more carefully worded. Believe it or not, tone matters. A shift in language often reflects internal updates, even when the public policy hasn't changed yet. This change in tone is important because it signals reevaluation. In corporate banking, language is rarely accidental. When frontline employees soften their responses, it's usually because new internal guidance or training material has been issued. Behind that small shift may be a much larger process of reassessment, one prompted by Iraq's ongoing reforms. The Central Bank of Iraq has tightened controls on dollar outflows, installed biometric safeguards at auctions, improved digital payment systems, and strengthened ties with U.S. regulators. These are the types of reforms that Western banks have been waiting years to see. These structural improvements build confidence. They show that Iraq isn't collapsing, it's stabilizing. Even a small, policy-driven appreciation, not the dramatic revaluation some people hype, could carry major symbolic weight. It would boost local purchasing power, improve investor confidence, and signal that Iraq is entering a more mature stage of economic development. For banks, the important factor isn't how big any appreciation might be. It's whether the currency is becoming more predictable and stable. Public interest in the dinar has always been complicated by speculation and misinformation. But beneath the noise, Iraq has been steadily modernizing its monetary system. The government never promised overnight gains. They promised was reform, transparency, and modernization, and the evidence shows they're delivering. Institutions worldwide, from the IMF to international banks, are paying attention to data, not internet rumors. As for Chase, their role is to prepare, not to guess. Being ready costs less than being caught off guard. And recently, observers have noticed what they are calling the Chase Bank twist, a collection of subtle indicators that point toward quiet internal adjustments. These might include system checks, currency list updates, and slight changes in compliance language. Banks don't run these processes for no reason. Every change is logged, tested, reviewed, and archived. These digital footprints often hint at strategy before any public decision is made. Beyond the technical side of this story, there's a human and symbolic aspect as well. For Iraqis, the dinar represents more than currency, it represents national recovery. For foreign holders, it represents belief in long-term stability. So when a bank as conservative as Chase starts recalibrating its systems around the dinar, it gives credibility to the idea that the currency is slowly moving back toward normalcy. Historically, currencies evolve through clear stages: stabilization, reform alignment, preparation, and finally integration. Iraq appears to be working through those stages one by one. And as the fundamentals align, changes that once seemed far off can suddenly move quickly. But for now, we're in the waiting period, a quiet stretch where behind-the-scenes work is happening, even though the public-facing world looks calm. Every system update, every change in phrasing, every subtle adjustment adds to the growing sense that something is shifting. These aren't signs of hype, but of structural groundwork being laid. Major banks don't overhaul currency systems without cause. When they update codes or revise compliance language, it's usually because they see a potential need emerging. Iraq, in turn, has continued strengthening its regulatory framework. It's improving transparency and expanding its economic partnerships. All of this sets the stage for greater monetary stability. And while Chase still maintains a conservative public stance, their internal activity suggests they are preparing for whatever may come next. This waiting phase isn't idle, it's active preparation. It's where the systems get tuned, the teams get ready, and the possibilities start to align. Patience is key during periods like this. It's how we separate hype from genuine progress. The renewed attention on the 25,000 dinar note is a sign that the old assumptions about Iraq's currency are fading. A new narrative is forming, quieter, steadier, and far more grounded in real economic data. We'll continue tracking developments at Chase, at the Central Bank of Iraq, and across global markets as this story unfolds. Thanks for staying with us here at Iraqi Dinar Hub, where we focus on clarity instead of noise. And as always, remember to make financial decisions with guidance from a qualified professional, because markets can shift quickly and without warning.